What You Choose to Put in the Ground by So Do Roses. Chapter 2. Summary. May Gage and Dot Sanders. Unstoppable force meets immovable object. It was always the worst part of getting in trouble, in Logan's opinion. Sitting in front of an adult that didn't care about him or anything he had to say. Someone who'd already decided what the truth was and now was just working on proving it was his fault. Mom's particular brand of biting comments delivered in a saccharine voice was not doing much good at this juncture. "Robbie Harris has already been to my office, Mrs. Sanders," said Mr. Marks. "He had to leave because his nose was broken. And is he going to be punished for what he did?" "Robbie spilled the bag accidentally, ma'am, and I hardly think spilling a bag of corn actually constitutes bullying." The door slammed open, and a wizened, stooping old lady with a claw-footed cane burst into the room. Logan startled so bad he grabbed his mother's hand in alarm. "So, Jimmy," she said sharply, "why have you got my boy down here like some kind of delinquent?" "Mrs. Gage, you should really wait outside until I finish speaking with the Sanders family." "It's Ms. Gage, Jimmy Marks. I prefer beer to a husband. It does as much housework and doesn't shit or snore." Roman made a choked-off noise, and Logan stared at him, baffled. Roman shrugged helplessly. "Ms. Gage, I'll be happy to talk about your grandson's assault on the other student after I am finished here. Now you listen here, Jimmy. If my boy walloped someone, they damn well deserved it. We do not condone physical assault as a method of conflict resolution in this school. And you don't think spilling a bunch of bitty pieces in front of a good neighbor counts as physical assault?" Logan heard his mother make some kind of strangled noise next to him, but he was too busy staring at the thundering crone in front of him. "Mr. Harris didn't touch him," insisted Mr. Marks. "Don't you shout at me, Jimmy Marks," she said as she jabbed her cane in his direction. "I diapered your ass when you didn't know a pebble from a jawbreaker." "My name is James, Ms. Gage," sputtered the principal. "And I diapered your daddy's ass too, so I'll call you whatever I damn well please," she snapped. "Now," she continued, "if a good neighbor came in here and spelled you to dance till your feet bled, I do believe you'd call that a physical assault, don't you think, Jimmy?" "That's your—" "So it stand to reason that pinning the poor boy to the spot till he finishes counting certainly does count as bullying?" "Ms. Gage, so how about this?" she said, moving towards the door. "We'll forget this whole mess happened, and I won't tell my birds about what you do or do not think counts as physical assault." "Your chickens?" said Mr. Marks incredulously. "Well, they love to gossip, Jimmy," Miss Gage said, and her face was the picture of innocence as she stood in the doorway. "And I live so very far out in the woods. Who knows who might hear us? Wouldn't want someone to call your bluff, now would we?" Mr. Marks made a pinched, furious expression. "Get out," he said, bitterly resigned. "Neither of you is going to be suspended at this time." "And we all part the dearest of friends," said Miss Gage sweetly. And then she walked out. The scene seemed frozen for a moment, but then Roman scrambled forward to help Logan grab his things. This set the rest of them in motion, and they all piled out. The final bell had long since rung, and the school was now almost entirely empty. Roman grabbed Logan by the shoulder and shook him. "Did you see that?" he said excitedly. "Mama had the principal shaking in his boots." "Your grandmother is incredibly intimidating," Logan agrees. "I suppose I owe her thanks." But as he moved towards Miss Gage, his mother's arm snapped out and stopped. "That's not necessary, sweetheart," she said, and she had a very wide and very fake smile on her face. "Thomas is waiting in the car. We should go home." Logan disagreed. It was not often he found himself in disagreement with his mother. "I would have thought that you would want me to thank Miss Gage for defending me." Mom's mouth pinched a bit, and she shook her head slightly. "We can talk about it more when we get home, okay?" "Okay," he said. "May I say goodbye to Roman?" Mom's eyes softened immediately. "Of course you can." Logan felt himself relax slightly, though he couldn't put his finger on why. He made his way over to Roman, who had given them some distance when his mother had pulled his arm. "Everything okay?" said Roman. "Not enough data to make a viable conclusion," replied Logan. "I've been told not to thank your grandmother, and my mother will not explain why." Roman hummed thoughtfully. Mama said some cagey stuff about your family that she wouldn't explain to me either. Like what? Said Logan. Well, she didn't like that we were friends, but she also said that no one in your family could hurt me. That's weird, right? Indeed, said Logan thoughtfully. Maybe it's a curse like Patton's. Here, pinch me. Logan did. Ow! Geez, not that hard. Logan, called Mom. I have to go. We'll discuss it later, he said. Okay, see you later. And, in a move Logan was quite unprepared for, Roman reached out and pulled him into a hug. Logan flailed slightly, floundering, but he recovered quickly. So, Roman was a hugger. So were Patton and Thomas. Logan wasn't completely at a loss. He squeezed back, then dropped his arms to signal he would like to be released. Roman took a step back and grinned. Bye, Logan! And then, waving his whole arm over Logan's shoulder, Bye, Logan's parents! When Logan returned to them, both his parents were waving back at Roman, but while Dad wore a polite smile, Mom looked like she might be about to cry. Let's go home, Barry, she said, her voice wavering slightly. Thomas and Logan spent the car ride exchanging alarmed expressions. It was hard not to, with the way Mom's breath kept hitching, like the very beginning of an aborted sob. After the second one, Dad reached across the dashboard and took her hand. Mom squeezed back so hard her knuckles turned white, but Dad didn't protest in the slightest. When they got home, Logan and Thomas both moved toward the basement, where they usually did their homework right after school. But a gentle throat clearing from Dad stopped them. He pointed towards the couch, and Mom was already sitting in the armchair next to it, wringing her hands. Thomas shrank back, just a little. Logan could understand why. It was very hard not to jump to the conclusion that they were in trouble. Logan grabbed Thomas's hand, and he relaxed ever so slightly, enough to fall in step with Logan and follow him to the couch. Logan sat on the side closest to their parents, just to be safe. Dad didn't sit. Instead, he stood behind Mom's chair, hands on both her shoulders. He smiled at Logan and Thomas, which for some reason didn't make Logan any less apprehensive. First, said Mom, I want to make something clear. You are not in trouble. You haven't done anything wrong. Logan sensed a but coming. And it was very gallant of your friend, Roman, to stick up for you like that. He sat with him too, Thomas interjected. He sounded like he was defending Roman, which didn't make sense because Mom had just given Roman a compliment. So why did Logan also feel like he needed to defend Roman? He seems like a wonderful boy. And she sounded sad. Why would that make her sad? Nothing about this conversation made sense. And of course you can be friends with him. She took a deep, steadying breath, and Logan saw Dad's hands tighten on her shoulders. But, she said, her voice now much firmer, I don't want you around May Gage. Logan and Thomas exchanged confused looks. Roman's grandma? Said Thomas. Yes, she said. I don't want you to go over to her house, or go places with Roman if he's with her, or ever be around her if me or your dad isn't there. Logan was baffled. Their parents had never placed such a restriction on them before. They walked around town by themselves most of the time. Mom and Dad had always encouraged them to be friendly to everyone they met. What did she do? Said Thomas, who, as always, was several steps ahead of Logan when it came to interpersonal dynamics. Dot shook her head firmly. We are not going to talk about that. It's grown-up stuff. So she did do something, said Logan. Logan, she warned, in the sharpest voice she'd ever directed at him. Thomas and Logan both shrank back instantly. Her eyes immediately softened. I'm sorry, said Mom softly. I shouldn't have snapped. I promise we'll talk about it when you're older. Logan nodded warily. So, just so there is no confusion, we are only permitted to interact with Roman at school? Mom's eyes widened. Oh, no, sweetheart, not at all. Roman can come over here whenever you want. He's always welcome here. Logan and Thomas exchanged another baffled look. That brought a smile back to Mom's face and a laugh from Dad. Okay, that's your reading each other's minds look. None of that, said Dad. It's not anything you boys need to worry about. Logan knew, of course, that he and Thomas could not read each other's minds. That didn't change the fact that he was certain that he and Thomas were both going to do nothing but worry about it. After homework, Thomas and Logan retreated to their room, and Thomas started talking as soon as the door shut. "This is hinky, right?" "I agree with your assessment, despite the fact that I am not sure what hinky means exactly," Logan agreed, climbing onto his bed and sitting cross-legged. "They really don't want you around Miss Gage." "Wait, me?" said Logan. "They told us both not to go around Miss Gage." Thomas shook his head. "I like Roman, but he's your friend, really, not mine. Why would I go over to his house?" "Then why did they tell both of us?" asked Logan. Thomas sat across from Logan on the bed, putting one elbow on his knee and perching his chin on his fist. "Because if they sent me away, it would seem like they were ganging up on you." Logan nodded slowly, understanding. "You with me, and it's 2 on 2. "Bingo," said Thomas. "And if it's just about me, it's probably magic-related." Thomas made a displeased face. "That doesn't matter," he said, uncomfortable. "It does not matter to you," said Logan. "It matters quite a bit to nearly everyone else." He couldn't help but smile a bit. "And while your denial of that is idealistic to the point of near insanity, I do still appreciate it." Thomas smiled back. "I love you too, even when you insult me with big words so I don't understand." "I am sure I don't know what you're insinuating," Logan said innocently. They both stared seriously at each other. Thomas broke first, and Logan followed him in a fit of giggling. The joking atmosphere was broken by a very distinct tapping at the window. Thomas looked curiously over Logan's shoulders, and then his mouth dropped open in shock. "Oh my goodness gracious!" he exclaimed, scrambling off the bed to the window. "What?" said Logan, but his question was answered when he turned and saw Roman, who was, somehow, outside their second-story window. Logan rushed to follow Thomas, who was opening the window. He reached out and grabbed Roman by the forearms, and he and Thomas both pulled him in. "What are you doing?" hissed Logan. "Well, Mama wouldn't tell me jack or squat, so I came here to see if your parents had been more forthcoming." "So," said Logan, his voice taking on an irritated edge, "you snuck out of your house, walked through, what, 1.5 miles of woods, and then climbed an oak tree so young it is a marvel it did not break in order to get into this room, instead of, I don't know, knocking on the front door?" "Well, of course I couldn't come in the front door," said Roman. "Your parents would have called Mama." "Actually," interjected Thomas, "I don't think our Mama would tell your grandma anything for love or money." "Oh, really?" said Roman. "What did she say?" "To never be alone with May Gage under any circumstances," replied Thomas. "Harsh," said Roman. "Mama acted like she was at a funeral, but she didn't tell me to avoid your parents." "What about me?" asked Logan. "What do you mean?" "Well, we've ascertained that whatever the issue is, it centers around me. Did your grandmother tell you to avoid me?" Roman shifted, a little nervous. "Well, she didn't seem happy about it," he said, "and I actually asked if she wanted me not to talk to you the first day we met. She told me no." "Fascinating," said Logan. "Your grandmother takes issue with the situation but doesn't seem to have a problem with any of the involved parties. Our parents are unconcerned by the situation but vehemently distrustful of your grandmother specifically." Wait, interrupted Thomas. "I know we all want to figure this out, but why couldn't we do it at school tomorrow? We're going to get in trouble if they find Roman up here." "Well, technically," said Logan, "Mom did say Roman was always welcome." "Reaching, but we're going with it," said Roman. "Do I get a say in this? It's my room too, you know." Roman opened his mouth to reply, but Logan heard something and raised a hand. "Listen," he said. "Roman, come here, the vent." "The vent?" said Roman. Thomas and Logan started moving towards the other side of the room. "Yes, the vent," said Logan. "They don't know about it," said Thomas, "or they wouldn't have secret conversations in the living room where we can hear them through it." The 3 of them gathered around the grate in the floor. Roman seemed surprised. "Convenient." Logan hushed him, and they all brought their ears to the vent. "Out of my house, May, now." "I'll be quite pleased if you don't shout at me, Dorothy, before I've even spoken. And I'm not technically in your house." "Yes, you always have a smart-ass remark for everything, don't you?" Logan and Thomas exchanged astonished glances. "Did Mom just—" "She swore!" said Thomas, and he looked absolutely scandalized. Roman shushed them insistently. "Why are you here, May?" said Mom. I'm deeply sorry to be darkening your doorstep, Miss Gage said, acidly sarcastic, and will be happy to leave and never come back soon as I got what I came for. What could you possibly want? There was a pause, where Logan got the distinct impression he could hear Miss Gage rolling her eyes. Roman! All three of them jumped, and Roman sighed heavily. I never get away with anything, he muttered. Your grandson isn't here, they heard Mom say. He sure as hell is, Miss Gage replied. He's listening at that vent right there with both your boys. Oh, come on, you fun-sucking old bat, Roman shouted through the grate. Yeah, I ruin everything, Miss Gage called back. Someone started to come up the stairs, and they all shuffled to their feet. Do you normally say such things to your grandmother? Logan asked quietly. I was under the impression you were very fond of her. Roman sent him a baffled look. I am. What do you mean? Logan didn't get a chance to answer because Dad walked through the door. Well, he said, I don't know how you got up here, Roman, but I guess it's time to go. He was smiling, but he also looked incredibly anxious. Are you okay, Mr. Sanders? Dad winced. I've been trying to avoid being in the same place as Dot and May at the same time for about 12 years, and I'm sincerely hoping they're both still going to be alive by the time we get back downstairs. Then why did you leave them alone? Said Roman curiously. I learned quite young that being around Dot when she's angry is both hazardous and incredibly unwise. Mama doesn't even squish spiders, Dad, said Thomas dubiously. Yeah, well, spiders aren't May Gage, Dad muttered conspiratorially. If they do fight, my money's on Mama, Roman whispered to the other two as they followed Dad down the stairs. Logan stared at him incredulously. Your grandmother walks with a cane, Roman. Bet me. You're 12, Roman. Do you even have money? Said Thomas. We don't have to bet money. Roman Joshua Gage, what have I told you about gambling? They rounded the corner of the stairs into the living room, where May Gage was still standing in the open doorway, and Mom was furiously rearranging the throw pillows and scowling. Roman groaned. That I'm not allowed to do it until I'm better at bluffing and won't bring shame upon our house. Thomas snorted almost imperceptibly. Logan was looking between Roman and his grandmother, wondering just how normal of an interaction this was. Now, you're going to apologize for breaking and entering like some kind of hooligan, and then we're going the hell home. Roman had the decency to look a little sheepish. I'm very sorry for breaking into your house, Mr. and Mrs. Sanders. Mom's whole face softened. Oh, dear, of course it's fine. Next time you can just use the front door, okay? Roman nodded. The truck is running, so wrap it up, please, said Miss Gage. Mom's face twisted, and she looked so angry, Logan instinctively shrunk back. Oh, are you in a hurry, you impatient Dot? Dad rushed forward, and Mom's mouth fell shut. She took a breath, and then brought out a smile that was as placid as it was obviously fake. By all means, let the girl speak. God knows she's been waiting more'n a decade to tell me off. Thomas had grabbed Logan's hand behind Roman's back, but Roman was just watching the two women, his head moving back and forth like it was a tennis match. May, I really think you ought to leave, said Dad quietly. Miss Gage squinted at Dad, then looked over the three of them, still grouped on the landing of the stairs. And then she looked at Logan, looked him dead in the face, with the exact same green eyes Roman had peered at him across the aisle with on the first day of school. The hair on his neck stood up. Well, she said finally, turning to their parents, I'll go then. Roman moved toward her, but she held up a hand. But I know my Roman, and he's just going to badger the hell out of me until I tell him what all this is about. If you'd like to make sure he don't get a biased version of the story, I'd be happy to do it now. She glanced at Logan again, especially seeing as I'm sure he won't keep his mouth shut. Mom and Dad looked at each other. They seemed to have a conversation exclusively with their eyebrows, and then Mom threw up her hands. Fine. I'll make coffee. Close the damn door. Mama, gasped Thomas. You still got a swear jar, Dorothy? Don't, Mom hissed. Miss Gage held one hand up in surrender. She closed the door behind her, then reached one hand out towards Roman. This couch is too low, Roman. Help me sit. Roman obediently stepped forward, gripping his grandmother's forearms, and she used the cane and the arm of the couch to lower herself down. Logan amended his assessment. Strange arguments or not, Roman clearly adored her. Mom came back from the kitchen and set the tray of mugs down on the coffee table. She didn't sit. "Well then," said Miss Gage, "would you like to start, Dorothy?" "I'll wait." "Suit yourself." She shrugged. "My daughter's name was Abigail Gage," she started, and Logan's eyes immediately zeroed in on Roman, who had gone totally still. "Her name was Abby." Miss Gage's mouth wrinkled. Logan couldn't tell if she was upset or amused. "Thought you wanted to wait." "She's not here to correct you. Someone has to do it." Logan looked at Roman again. He'd gone sheet white and was staring intently at the coffee table. Logan found himself speaking before he could really think about it. "Roman?" Roman didn't seem to hear him, and when he looked up, it wasn't at Logan, but at Mom. "Did you know her?" he said, his voice strangled. Mom's face went through a variety of expressions, too fast for Logan to decipher them, before she settled on what Logan could only imagine was heartbreak. "Oh, Roman," she said, "your mother was my best friend in the entire world." She took a shaky breath and then took a seat in the chair. Dad, at the other end of the couch from Miss Gage, handed her one of the cups of coffee. Roman leaned forward, enraptured. "Abby was lovely," said Dot. "Lovely and kind and sweet and so smart. Gosh, she was always reading something. She never had a bad word to say about anybody." Logan crammed himself into the other chair with Thomas. They exchanged a look. He was certain they were thinking the exact same thing. Why had they never even heard of this woman? Did she... Roman stumbled over his words, and Logan wanted to do something. He wasn't quite sure what. He'd never heard Roman be anything other than smugly eloquent, and hearing him be so hesitant was causing all sorts of jumbled, unpleasant emotions. "I mean, do you know, me, I guess?" Roman finished in a small voice. Dot turned an incredulous face to Miss Gage. "My God, May, have you told him anything?" "No, I have not," said Miss Gage, her voice flat. "How could you—" "Tell him what exactly, Dorothy?" she said. "Tell him his grandmother's a damn fool, that his mama died angry at me and I deserved it? Tell him sometimes the story doesn't have a happy ending?" The anger on Mom's face had been replaced by surprise. She looked completely taken aback. Miss Gage shook her head. She looked incredibly sad. "Dorothy, do you really think I came here to pick another fight?" Logan had been watching the two women, but his eyes were drawn back to Roman. He was looking at his grandmother with what could only be described as horror. "Dorothy had her baby," she said. "You were just barely toddling, Roman. And on the 10th day, well," she looked at Logan. "We all know what happened the 10th day," she continued. "Don't you dare! Didn't I say I was a fool?" Miss Gage snapped at Mom. "Yes, I told you to give him back. Yes, I told you he'd bring nothing but trouble. And yes, Dorothy, I am capable of admitting when I'm wrong." She looked back at Logan, and for the first time addressed him directly. "I thought you a changeling and nothing else. Didn't occur to me you were just a baby before any of that. I told Abigail she was a fool, and said if she wanted to flounce about with the good neighbors, she could do it away from me. And she did." Miss Gage took a sip of her coffee. "So it was my fault," said Logan. "No!" said both women and Dad in vehement unison. "The boy's just like you, Dorothy," snorted Miss Gage. "Didn't listen to a damn word I said." "Why," said Roman, "why didn't you tell me any of this?" His grandmother returned her eyes to the coffee table. "Shame is a persistent emotion, Roman, which is why I did my level best to raise you without any." Her words were met with silence so thick Logan could hear the hum of twilight insects outside the house. "How could I tell you I lost Abigail to my own pride and then to the grave? That if she'd had a choice, you would have grown up anywhere but in my house." She laughed bitterly. "Probably this house." Logan glanced at his mother, whose eyes had gone shiny. "I am sorry, Dorothy," Miss Gage said solemnly, "for every cruel thing I said to you when I was being a backwards old biddy. I am sorry, Roman, for hiding this from you. And I'm sorry, Logan, for blaming you in the loss of my daughter when the only one to blame was me." "I accept your apology, Mama," said Roman instantly, and she actually looked surprised. "Quite a bit faster than you normally say it," she said. "Normally I need to think about it for a bit. I mean, hiding my shoes, that's quite an offense," he said cheekily. Miss Gage snorted. Mom cleared her throat gently. "I accept your apology, May," she said woodenly. There was a fraction of a pause, and Logan stood up from the chair. Thomas gave him an alarmed look. "I do not accept your apology, Miss Gage." Roman and Mom looked surprised, but Roman's face quickly morphed into anger. But before he could speak, Logan continued. "Miss Gage should not have to apologize because she was in the right." Roman's face flipped right back to incredulity. "What? That makes no sense." "She was not right to say those things, Logan," said Dad vehemently. "But she was right," he shouted. "Animals end up in people's lockers when I am mad at them. I spoil the milk every time I'm grounded. The fight at the school today was because of me, not to even mention the dozens of fights centered around me before this. I am, objectively, the source of a statistically significant amount of trouble. She was right." Thomas grabbed at Logan's sleeve, but Logan shook him off. "Whether I was right or not, it don't make a lick of difference," said Miss Gage. "If I was right, it didn't keep Abigail alive. And I promise Roman's quite capable of getting into trouble without your help, Logan Sanders." She reached out, cupping his hand in her right and patting it with her left. "All children are trouble," she continued. "It's how you learn. If I listed every white hair Roman ever gave me, we'd be here all week." "Oh, yes, blame your shriveling old age on me," said Roman. "My hair was as red as a cardinal before you came along, you little leech." Mom cleared her throat. They all looked at her, and she seemed to chew on her words for a moment. She gave a very small, hesitant smile. "I would like to point out that Abby and I were responsible for at least 30% of the white hairs." Ms. Gage cackled so hard it morphed into a hacking cough. All right, she said. "Enough of this flowery bullshit. Roman's got to feed the chickens before it gets dark." Roman groaned. "How are the lovely ladies?" said Dad. "A pack of gossiping hens, as always," said Roman dryly. "I'm sure you think that joke never gets old," said Miss Gage as she started to get up. Roman jumped up, reaching out to help her. Thomas jumped up too and looked at Logan, the question clear in his eyes. Logan cleared his throat. "We can also help, if you need it, Miss Gage." "Don't need it at the moment," she said, and she and Roman did seem to have it well in hand. "But if you really want to help me, you can keep an eye on Roman at school." "Hey!" "I do not understand how you think me capable of keeping him out of trouble." "Oh, I don't mean that," she scoffed, waving her hand. "I meant like making sure he don't gamble or take stupid dares and bring shame upon my house. I am right here." A tall order, to be sure. Roman made an offended noise. "How dare you betray me like this?" Logan caught a glimpse of his mother out of the corner of his eye, looking between him and Roman like she couldn't decide if she wanted to cry or sing. For a fairy, he didn't like to assume things were magical until given very good reason. But this moment, well, it felt a whole lot like fate. And that's the end of What You Choose to Put in the Ground.